They couldn't have had one Powerwolf song in this. I mean, Night of the Werewolves is literally asking to be in this movie. I'll tell you, if there's one subgenre out there that I think is completely underrated, not utilized enough, and definitely deserves more spot in the limelight, it's pirates. I mean, seriously, Pirates of the Caribbean is the only franchise we got, and then everything else just doesn't exist. Like, come on. But if I'm going with the second one, yeah, I'd say werewolves. You know, they just don't make enough werewolf movies. They're constantly spitting out a bunch of vampire crap, and they're never giving werewolves that fair, equal opportunity in the spotlight. So please, in the comments, if you have a favorite werewolf movie, let me know down below what your favorite werewolf movie is and how it stacks up against this one. And if you're looking forward to the future projects like The Wolfman, directed by Lee Winnell, that's supposed to come out. I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. Just be respectful, of course, it's just a movie after all. Leave this video a like if you like this review, subscribe if you want more stuff like that. And of course, check out the links in my description where you can find me on Instagram, Letterboxd, Serialized, and GG, where I post movie reviews, TV show reviews, and video game reviews. But all that aside, let's get back to this review. You see, I'm a guy of simple taste. I like action movies and werewolves and Frank Grillo. Was that a good impression? Keep it in, delete it. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Alright, keep it in. He was rating my impression, not the movie, by the way. So I realize that not everyone's going to be sold on this movie as easily as I am. See Frank Grillo in the movie, boom, you got me. Oh, it's got werewolves in it too, and it looks like The Purge. Okay, let's go. But man, I cannot lie, I had a really good time with this one. I mean, okay, don't go into this expecting that it's high art or award-worthy by any means. It's totally schlocky and ridiculous. It's a prime B movie, and that's exactly what it was supposed to be. That's exactly what it is. And for what it's worth, I thought it was pretty decent. Or at least meagerly entertaining. I mean, come on. How can you not have fun watching Frank Grillo shoot a minigun at werewolves? I mean, come on. I saw interviews with Stephen C. Miller where he talked about how he was making this film and his inspirations that he drew from. And honestly, what I gathered from that brief interview was that he's a passionate filmmaker about this kind of stuff. This was a passion project for him, and he liked the script that he saw and was able to work it into something that he thought was worthwhile. The only other movie by him I've seen is First Kill with Hayden Christensen and Bruce Willis from 2017. It was one of those direct-to-DVD things, but honestly, I had a good time with that one too. So 2 for 2, I guess. I really appreciate everything that this production team accomplished with the practical effects. A lot of the times, you know, horror movies are overusing CG, or just movies in general are overusing CG. Blockbusters, horror movies, literally everything. But these days in the horror space, people are using it a lot more frequently, and it just takes that tangible aspect out of the film. And it's just like, oh yeah, computer generated, whatever. It kind of takes you out of the experience. But when you add in practical effects, it makes it so much more worthwhile and feels a lot more real. And with these practical wolf suits that they had 7-foot tall performers in these suits that were running around and had the animatronic mouths and everything. And I don't know, I thought that was really neat.
I just think they're neat.
I think the performers did a good job in my opinion, but I still think to this day my favorite on-screen werewolf is Remus Lupin from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. What's that? I just contradicted myself by saying that a CG werewolf from 20 years ago is better than the werewolves in this movie that were made entirely with practical suits? Yeah, nobody will notice. Frank Grillo does exactly what he needs to in typical Frank Grillo fashion. He's just so much fun to watch. He's got the charisma, he's got the swagger, he's got the cool factor.
Bite me.
Love that line. Lou Diamond Phillips is in this movie, and he was pretty good too, though he doesn't have that big of a role in the film. But I don't know, I just appreciate seeing him in this movie. Matter of fact, I just met him like a month ago at Twin Cities Con. Not related to this movie, I just wanted to say that. Katrina Law, who played Nissa on Arrow years ago, was in this as Amy Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen. They call her Dr. Chen all the time. Matter of fact, even her husband calls her Dr. Chen. He says, "I love you, Dr. Chen." That's a real line that he says in the movie. She's an okay sidekick to Frank Grillo's character, I guess. Nothing too amazing, but not given the best material at times. However, I will say, she doesn't have nearly as bad as material as Frank Grillo's sister-in-law. Oh my gosh, I don't know what they were doing with her lines, but they were just terrible. I mean, whether it was the dialogue she was given or just the crappy writing in general that made her character make all these stupid decisions one after another, or the numerous scenes where she's repeating these affirmations. At one point, she is listening to some podcast that's giving her these affirmations about, you know, surviving the night with the werewolves and everything. And she's just like constantly repeating it. And it's just one of those like, I am strong, I am confident, I am capable, I can do this type thing. And it's just so dumb because then she starts shouting it out and then yelling, you know, like, I'm gonna get you, MFer, to the werewolves. And then her little daughter is there like, yeah! Honestly, all the scenes where they cut away from Frank Grillo to her at the house, it just kind of holds this movie back. In my opinion, they were the least interesting parts of the film. Narratively speaking, the opening act is almost entirely exposition. I understand why they did that, though. I mean, they're just dumping as much information as they possibly can right out the gate, simply because this movie is 90 minutes-ish, and it moves at a pretty fast pace, so they want to just get right to the action as quickly as possible, and I appreciate that. Just wish they could have had a more natural ebb and flow to how they're conveying all the lore of this situation. Speaking of the lore, I just love how different this movie was from other werewolf movies out there. And I mean, they made a point to say in like interviews and promotion and stuff that usually you have like 1 or 2 werewolves in a movie, and that's like the main creature of the feature. But in this, it's an entire like population that's affected by some dormant gene that is activated by a supermoon once a year. And that's what turns like literally everyone exposed to moonlight. So they have different ways of how they prevent themselves from being exposed to moonlight and how they, you know, are able to take down the werewolves and all that, which funny enough, they don't talk about like, oh, the only thing that can kill them is silver. Like bullets, blades, trauma, all of it works really. So they're kind of taking that old werewolf lore and just making their own twist on it, which I appreciate. It was enough to keep things fresh and different. However, I will say, as much as I appreciate the director's passion for this film, the lighting in this movie is pretty terrible. I mean, I'm not epileptic, but thank gosh I'm not epileptic, because this for sure, guaranteed, would have sent me into a seizure. The amount of strobe lights in the action sequences, and I mean, it is constant. At first, there is some intense strobe lighting in the first action sequence, and even my friend, who also isn't epileptic, was like, man, this is pretty intense. And I'm like, I'm sure it's just this one scene and then it'll stop. I mean, not really. There's a good chunk of scenes throughout the rest of the movie that feature strobe lights, or at least one light that's just constantly flickering. And I understand why they're doing this. It's to keep the werewolves hidden so they don't have to be full blast on screen the whole time. And to be fair, there is some merit in terms of storytelling, building tension and suspense, where you don't want to show your monster right away, because then that just kind of gives away the terrifying unease of the whole thing. But at the same time, they are already showing so much of the werewolves in these sequences as well. They're just kind of bouncing around quick little glimpses. So there'll be constant cuts. There's just light that's obscuring them, fog that's obscuring them, and then there's also lens flares obscuring them. There are enough lens flares in this movie to make J.J. Abrams blush. But I will say, if there's one scene that I really appreciated the composition of, it was the scene where they're under the car and they're hiding from the werewolves. Frank Grillo talked about it in an interview too. I thought it was awesome. But the one thing I gotta laugh about is the fact that these hazmat suits that they're wearing at the start of the movie have Iron Man HUDs underneath their masks. I mean, these are like literally just hazmat suits, right? They're just like the normal hazmat material, and then they got a shield over the face that's darkened so you can't see the actor's face. But because they wanted to show how the actors are reacting in this scene, they keep cutting to these under the helmet shots of them where they have like all these like holograms and everything on the side reading their oxygen level and their battery life and all this, and it's just like, okay, this is a little ridiculous, don't you think? All right, I'm going to talk about something at the end, but I'm going to keep it vague, so for people who haven't seen the movie yet, I'm not going to totally ruin it for you, but if you don't want anything, I'm just going to put this up right now. That way you're aware of the mild spoilers I'm about to get into right now. So at one point, one of the characters turns into a werewolf, and another character is trying to snap them out of it by appealing to the werewolf on an emotional level, thinking that this is going to trigger something in them and bring them back to being human. Right when that happened, I started going, oh no, don't do it, don't do that. Thankfully, it didn't work, but man, was I going to be mad if somehow they were able to break the werewolf curse by the power of love or something. Overall, I consider this more of a guilty pleasure than anything. No, it's not a great movie, but I had fun with it, so any valid criticism you can lob at it, I will nod my head and say, yeah, you're totally right. I'm not going to argue with you. If you thought this was like one of the worst movies of the year, I would totally not come at you for it, because I recognize that this is kind of schlocky and cheaply made, and they're operating on a budget. They did the best with what they could do, I think. And they had a fun enough concept. I would definitely like to see another film in this franchise, or if they make it a franchise, if this makes enough money, because, kind of rooting for the underdog on this one. It's an indie horror action movie. Other movies this year have had insanely wide budgets, and so they're not turning a profit. I'm hoping for the little guy to actually make something of themselves and prove that, hey, sometimes these indie movies, they may not have the biggest budget, but they can still draw in a crowd. I mean, Terrifier 3 did it, so hopefully this one can too. But for a score out of 10, I'm going to give this one a 7. Again, 7 might be generous, but I had a lot of fun with it. A lot more fun than my buddy Eric did, that's for sure. But please, like I said before, comment down below what your favorite werewolf movie is, whether you saw this movie and you loved it or you hated it. I would love to see how our opinions differ, but again, be respectful about it. No need to go at each other's throats over this. But until next time, guys, God be with you. Take care.